Okay, so my name's Rod Sherwin. I am a director of a company called Liminal, and we help companies respond and adapt to change and create more human-friendly workplaces. My role in that company, apart from chief cook and bottle washer and do everything he's doing in the back end, is also coach, trainer, facilitator, workshops, things like that. And I was first exposed to solution focused about 18 years ago, I think. Paul and Mark's book, picked it up, blew my mind, started reading everything and anything I could after that, and have been using it. I've used it in private practice one-on-one in sort of a counselling sense, and I've also used it coaching executives and leaders and anyone else in a corporate world. I traditionally have worked in IT and agile teams, so a lot of coaching in there. But nowadays more doing change management and using solution-focused approach to change. So my view at the moment is generally from the organisational perspective, but I've worked one-on-one in this, using it in therapy as well. But anyway, a couple of years ago, I managed to go to the solution-focused conference in Boulder, Colorado. Brought home a lovely little token on that, which has, you know, the basic three principles of solutions focus. And the three principles are: if it's not broken, don't fix it. If it works, do more of it. If it's not working, do something different. And the middle one got me thinking one day: if it works, do more of it. And I'm like, well, how do you know what's working? And I'll share two stories about where I kind of asked that question, and it baffled the person I was asking. So the first one was sort of a medical appointment. A diagnosis had come through, a form of treatment was suggested, and my question was, okay, how are we going to know that's working? Pretty simple question, right? The surgeon I was talking to got very defensive. Well, if you don't do this, you'll die. And I'm like, well, that wasn't the question I asked. I just want to know, how are we going to know this treatment is working? And by that I meant what tests we're going to use, etc. But you know, the fact that I even asked a question just completely upset the surgeon. Another example I'll get from the corporate world, I worked for a state government agency that was giving away grants money. People could apply for this grant. It was about innovation and things like that. And, you know, they're giving away millions of dollars. And I went, well, how do you know they're actually, that money's having the effect it should have? You know, they put out in their business plan, here's what we're planning to do, all this sort of stuff. How do we know that they're successful, or they're at least having some effect? We don't measure that. And I went, you're giving away my money, my taxpayer money, to people, and you don't actually know if it's being used effectively. So it was interesting, those two questions, and it came back to the, you know, how do you know this is working? So what I'd like to do, explore in this session, I mean, in solution focus, we do a lot of noticing what's working, what's improving, things like that. And there are kind of, I'd really like to explore this as broadly as we can, from different ways of knowing. I mean, you got in the corporate world, qualitative, quantitative changes. A little bit more sort of left field is things like noetic knowing, where you just know, but you don't know how you know. So the first part of this, I'd like to explore different ways of knowing what's changed, and like I said, take it as broadly as you like. And then I've got a second stage after that. But what I'd like to do, I'll do this just in a couple of sessions. So we'll start off, I'll give you just 3 minutes in your own head. And if it helps, come up with a story like one I've suggested, where you did notice something working in some way. But I'll just give you sort of 3 minutes to think about how you know something's working, where you've seen examples of it, and how you figured out it was working. And then we'll drop into rooms, because we've got enough people. I'll have some small group discussions to be good. So I'll just take 3 minutes right now and have a think, jot down some ideas. How do you know what's working? For those who've just joined in, everybody's just taking a bit of thinking time around the question of how do you know what is working? What ways can you measure it? Can you notice it? Become aware of it? Just give that another minute or two. All right, so if everybody's had a moment to think of examples and ideas, and what I'll do now is drop you into some breakout rooms to just discuss what you came up with and share those ideas and how you knew what was working. So if you're not familiar with the Zoom breakout rooms, I'll click a button in the moment. You'll get a prompt saying, please join this room. Just click that button. It'll drop you into the room. At some point, probably I'll give you about 5 to 10 minutes to have that discussion. And then we'll close the breakout rooms and everybody will come back into the room. Most of the time it's pretty seamless. Hopefully it'll work okay. So I'll create the rooms now. When you see the prompt, just click on it and join the room and just discuss what you came up with, especially sharing those stories. Just see who's dropping in and out now. Okay, let's create some rooms, see what happens. I'm going to join.
Hey, yeah.
Yeah, I'm in the UK.
No, I'm in Mexico, and you're in the UK. Did you get up?
Yeah, yeah. I haven't gone to bed yet. It's 25 to 3 in the morning now.
Oh, God.
Awesome, Joe. Go.
I was desperate to hear your accents. That's what it was.
Perfect. Hi, Rod.
Hey, Sophie. Well, we've got you know the whole world again. We've got Europe, we've got America, we've got Mexico, Australia. It's fantastic.
Cool.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Right, the whole world.
All right.
Whereabouts in Mexico are you?
Sorry?
Whereabouts in Mexico?
In Mexico City.
Oh wow.
Yeah, in Mexico City, almost in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the boss is here. I bet we better do our homework.
I just thought this would be a fun room to join.
Okay,
Rod.
go.
Go.
I was just saying, I try to set up success criteria before I start. So have a picture of what that will look like if it is working. What will I notice? And I document that. So in discussions with the client or even in my own self-talk, I will actually say, well, if it's working, these things will be happening and I'll notice these things. So I actually do the miracle question. I actually build the picture before I start.
And can you give some examples of those things that you
might
have on your list of that sort of success criteria?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to be talking about some of that in my session later on today at 1:30. So how we know, for example, how do we know in veteran wellbeing if what we are doing with the sessions that we're running is actually working? And we've developed impact and engagement scales to actually filter through and have a look at each of the sessions that we run in terms of, you know, what impact scores did we get back from participants? Were they engaged with the work that we were doing? and are they motivated now to find out more? So those are the measures that we've set up for those sessions in the Veteran Wellbeing Summit space. And so we're actually collecting data on that. So we've actually got some, you know, we will know that they're motivated. Not only will they tell us on a scale that they're motivated, but we actually want to know specifically from them in words, what is it that's actually demonstrable. Yeah, what's demonstrable in terms of that motivation? Have they connected with a presenter? Are they going and seeking out new ways of doing things? Are their confidence levels increasing? What does that look like for them? How has it materially improved their life?
I definitely love to drill in those sort of measures. Things like, are they motivated to find out more? How do you measure that? Not necessarily measure. I'm reluctant to use that word because it's not always about measurement.
Well, actually, for me, it is. So I want to know. I actually want to know what that looks like in terms of a scale. So I use scales a lot. Yes, it is self-reporting, but it's useful, I think, and it's still statistically relevant to be able to use scales in that way. Yeah. That's my little piece.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe I got a little bit confused the question, because when I started thinking about the question, I thought, okay, how do I know what works? How do I know it, or how do other people? Does other people show it, and in what kind of settings? And I got a little bit mixed up.
Yeah.
So actually, I was quite surprised by the first answers that came up, because I thought, okay, when I have people like face to face, how do I know what works? And usually it's quite surprising, but almost all the things I wrote down has to do with couple things, expressions, sounds, and everything which is not actually that concrete in terms of indicators and measuring and words and things like that. I think, for an example, the first things I just wrote down, just like the first thing was just like breath, as I work a lot with conflicts. So the first thing I can see if something works is breath is changing. Maybe it's not changing for something particular. Maybe we don't know that when people do like this, it means like this and that, but we know that something is changing. And then we have a very good clue to ask for that. So the first thing I will be able to look at is breath, change in movements. If it has been a person that's been like that all the time and suddenly they're starting, no? So then at least there's another clue to say, okay, something has changed. Could you just describe a little bit what is it that changed? And if that like constructs on top of the idea that something is working, wow, then we have it even confirmed, and people have also focused on it themselves. So I was thinking a little bit more couple at the beginning.
Yeah, but that's what fascinates me about this question. It's such a simple sounding question. How do you know it's working? But there's so many subtleties to it, to the way you can explore it.
Yeah. So when I first wrote down when you asked that question, I thought about how I use it at home with my family, and how I speak to my children. And so I noticed the difference, and I know that it's working because the way that they respond, and we're all happier, and there's less battles if I phrase things in a more solution-focused way. And that was the first thing that I wrote down. And then, as you've just been talking there, I suppose on a one-to-one basis with clients, I always start the second session with what's better. So that kind of gives me a more positive place to start, asking them what they notice, what other people around them notice, which kind of helps me help them to see what's better. But I work with two companies over in the UK. I work for Steve Flatt, but I also work for a company called Change in Birmingham. I don't know if you've heard of them. It's where I did my training, and they have a a measurement called WEMWebs. Have you ever heard of that? And so that's, they have a criteria of about 10 questions, and it's a scale of 0 to 1 to 5. So 1 is the worst, 5 is the best, and lots of different questions that asks them, are they feeling relaxed? Are they happy? Do they feel that they're able to make their own decisions? That type of thing. And then that scores them. And so after 3 sessions or 4 sessions, you can then see their scores going up. So is that kind of what you were?
Yeah, well, all these different ways of noticing.
Yeah.
Sorry, I keep getting distracted because people keep joining and I keep having to put them in rooms and then someone else joins. So
Yeah.
I've got dual monitors, which is why my eyes keep going that side.
Oh, that's just another thing that you just reminded me, that both of you from first, Jackie and Joe, that sometimes it has worked. I know how it works when people mentions a lot of things that they hadn't said before. Many times when I ask what's better or what have changed and what would you like to change, and then people give a long description. And when I ask, and what is the most important thing of all the things you just mentioned, and they say something that they have never mentioned before.
Yeah.
So that is just very common, and I think it's quite funny because it shows that you cannot ask it enough. It works. Keep asking.
Yeah.
I like that.
It gets a bit meta there, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Don't worry, my next question is going to get even more meta.
Yeah. I think there's just sort of so, like you're saying, Rod, there's just so many ways of an indication of success. So, well, I get caught up in the data because a lot of stuff that I have to do is remotely. So I'm not actually speaking with people directly. Sometimes it's through a different means of communicating. But you can use what Sophie and Joe are talking about, which is the change in the breath, the change in the demeanor and the way people are engaging and the energy. You can pick up in the energy when you're speaking with somebody that there's a definite shift in energy. So when we do confirmation interviews, but post interviews, it's just very interesting because exactly what you're saying, Sophie. They come back with something that they've never mentioned on any survey, in any conversation that you've had with them, and it's sometimes completely left field, and often it's left field, and sometimes it's got completely nothing to do with the original context which brought you together. And you go, wow, ripple effect, like it just yeah. So you might have been like, we were talking, working with groups with suicide prevention courses, and I'm not a psych, all right? So, but we were facilitating these courses, and it's so interesting. The feedback that we've got from people is how much of a difference it's made in their relationships. Nothing to do with the suicide prevention, but they're actually taking the skills and the conversation techniques outside of the context that we were working in. So, you think, okay, sometimes the solution's got nothing to do with the problem. Sometimes the solutions have got nothing to do with anything that you've ever thought of before.
It's funny, the first time I sort of gave a talk on solutions focus to an IT agile conference, these guys are all IT, and I sort of walked them through a bit of solutions focused interviewing, and then asked for, how did that make a difference? Anybody got any examples? And the first person who put up their hand said, well, I've worked out now how to get my kids to do their homework. It had nothing to do with agile or IT.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I had to laugh because, SF in the military world is actually special forces, right? So the guys I've got on my panel knew nothing about SF at all. So, that's quite it's quite an interesting, we don't mention it. We don't mention it at all in the work that we do. So we don't even mention the words. So, so there you go. Homework. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's our 10 minutes up. So I'll bring everybody back to the main room.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very
Thank
nice
you.
to meet you.
Yeah,
Nice
nice to meet
meeting you all.
I'm taking your lead, Sophie, and putting the putting the city after my name. I think it's a great idea. All right, I think there's about a 30-second delay. And once people get talking, they normally don't want to come back. They know that, like, just leave us in the room, so you might, you know. You might be on mute, Sophie.
I know that. I talk and it's all muted.
Welcome back, everyone. Hopefully we got everyone dropping in. I noticed a few people who joined in late, so apologies if I just sort of dropped you into a room. I'm assuming the others were able to bring you up to speed on what was going on. All right, we got everyone back. So what would you like to share? What came up in your group and what surprised you about the ways that we know something's working? And just remember if you're on mute or not.
Well, I was kind of surprised that I was that surprised. because I thought it was quite easy to answer that question, and it wasn't that easy to answer the question. Lots of different stuff comes up and lots of different questions, and for me it was quite interesting to notice that I was thinking a lot about the non-verbal signs of what works.
Yeah, that shift in breathing or someone's eyebrow just moving or something, you know something's shifted. You know, what's going on there. Yeah.
Rod, I thought that was a fantastic question. It really made me think. And I kind of looked at it from a generic perspective, if you like. No matter what I was doing, whether it was something I was doing to improve something in myself or working with a team or whatever, you know, how would I know that's working? And I came up with 4 little thoughts. The first one was it generates, or whatever we're doing is generating curiosity. And by generating curiosity, it's causing interaction to happen, and it's happening naturally. So whether if it's something I'm doing myself, it's me interacting with my own feelings. But if I'm doing something with a team or a group, then they're starting to ask me questions. You know, that interaction is happening. And out of that comes opportunity and the discussion on possibilities. And then when you start discussing possibilities and you've got that interaction, then more things start to happen. So I would suggest that the biggest clue that I've got that something's working is that it's acting as a catalyst for more action. So that it's creating ongoing momentum. Make sense?
Yeah. And I guess the next question would be, how do you notice that well, it creates action, so I guess you're noticing the actions as a result of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I was with Kerry and Colleen and Farah, and it made us talk a little bit about silence. Because sometimes, you know, how do you know something's working? People are silent. They start thinking, and we suddenly realise how little time we actually give to, or how much opportunity we give for space and time, and that we get scared of silence. And in a business world where everybody has to be busy all the time, everybody's claiming to be time poor, every now and again you try to get through the message that taking 15 minutes of thinking or silence will reap huge benefit and reward for you. Just let it happen, because so often, you know, businesses feel they don't have that time. They don't realize the value that thinking time gives them.
and there's a measure that goes with that, that can, you know, I've worked for consulting firms and it's all about utilisation. And if you're not 100% utilised, there's something wrong. Yet, if you are 100% utilised, you probably don't have any thinking time, so you're not innovating. So being 100% utilised means the company's actually not innovating and improving. So that measure in itself sort of stifles, you know, the thinking time much more.
Yeah, this is where I see there's a bit of a difference between therapy clients type thing and businesses, is that often when I've watched people doing therapy and stuff, they have a little bit more time to play with. They don't come under the same pressure that a business, you know, or when you talk about single session therapy, for want of a better word, business want single session therapy. You know, they don't want series and series and series of workshops. They want to see stuff get to action. And a lot of the time we talk about developing platforms and future perfects and identifying strengths and stuff, but our clients really want to see, okay, what are the small steps? They want to get to those small steps fairly quickly. So you have to almost, to some degree, honor the process, but try and accelerate the process without losing any value out of it.
Yeah. That sounds like it could be a whole nother session in itself.
Yeah.
What else? What else did other people find that surprised them, or was curious about finding what works, or knowing what works?
Well, we had a discussion around therapy, but I'm just going to say something about Lauren, who was in our group, and she's a new kind of solution-focused therapist. If you don't mind me saying what you said, because it was really interesting. She said that what she's noticing, what's working, is as she's doing more solution-oriented thinking and practice, she's feeling herself better as a therapist and leaving sessions feeling that something is working much better than when she was doing the other kinds of therapy from before. So that's what she noticed, is in herself more than, I mean, and I said, of course, and probably in the person you're doing therapy with as well, but as a result.
Yeah, I can add on to that. Thank you, Beverly. I get a bit nervous doing these things. It's my first time doing something like this. But I was just reflecting on my own practice and personal professional development, coming from a sort of a CBT background via occupational therapy and mental health. I work one-on-one doing brief intervention counselling with university students. And so I completely shifted from a CBT approach to solution focused about 2 years ago. And just the change that I feel when I am engaged with someone in that room is so different to when I was doing CBT, where it felt really clunky and very forced and very sort of like I had more power around what was going on for them and teaching them things that they already knew. And so when I shifted my approach to much more solution focused and still doing lots of learning around that, there has been such a change in the feeling, but also the demeanor of the person that's sitting in front of me, and leaving the room feels different as well, the energy in the room. So that was just a reflection that I had, which has been really wonderful to experience.
Yeah, and I think we all get addicted to that when we when we start using solution focus.
Yeah.
It's interesting thing. I mean, so much, you know, we're taught with solutions focus, observable behavioural changes that, you know, you could watch on a video and narrate. But there's so many broader ways of knowing, I guess. That sense of what's going on. How do we pick that up? And it's interesting. I'm a member of the Institute of Noetic Sciences in the US, and you know they talk so much about this noetic knowing of just sometimes you know, but you don't know how you know. But we pick up on all these things, and it's kind of I'm going to give you a question along those lines. It might be a little bit more esoteric, but my question is now: how do you notice And what I'm interested in here is kind of, you know, Lauren mentioned, I feel more comfortable, there's a addition in the room. How do you notice that? Is observations, senses, it's whatever. Again, I'm just exploring this, take it as wide as interesting you got. And again, I'm really curious about, even in the corporate world, you know, often we don't talk about the sense that the room was in sync or not in sync, or the team was in flow. But how would we notice those things as well? So it's kind of, you know, we'll go a bit meta, as in, how do you notice something is working? And not just what we're looking at, but what is our processes, our senses, or whatever, how does that information get to us, if you like? And I'll give you just another minute or two to scratch your head on that one before we'll drop back into rooms again. So I'll just give you another minute or two, just have a think around that. It's a tough question. It is a tricky question, and again, don't sort of feel that you have to answer it too rigorously. You know, whatever associations it actually creates for you is fine. You know, this is real free-form exploration. It's just a question that I'm curious about. John, and I've posted the questions in the chat, and John's just added one in there. And yeah, there's some interesting questions in that. So have a look in the chat, but I'll drop you in the rooms, and again, we'll take another. Yeah, we've got time, 10 minutes to have this chat. It'll be random, so I can't guarantee you'll end up in the same room as you were before, but let's see how we go.
There you go. Hi, Sophie.
There you go. Hello again.
I'm just stalking Sophie because we haven't caught up for ages, so I'm just dropping it.
So that okay. No, but this is so interesting. So I would love to hear.
So just surprising, just had another people drop in at that moment.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
That's a difficult question, though. How do you notice?
I know it can get very meta, which, you know, it could be just about the senses. It could be 5, 6 senses, however many we have, was my initial thoughts. But what about you guys? What was your thoughts there? Doing your head in, Gail.
I was thinking about what do you notice, and then I kept saying no, that's how do you notice, and the only thing I could come up with was that I sort of pull myself out of what's going on, and then it comes to me, and then I go back in, and I don't know how that happens. I think sometimes I consciously do it. I kind of sit back, and even when I'm with someone in the room, and I'll kind of sit back, and but I don't know what it is. It's hard to describe it. Does that make sense?
I think for me at least, it's very different from one setting to the other. So if I have very personal contact, I would be, as we also talked about before, I would look at breath. I would look at movements in the body if they suddenly move something. I would also try to notice if they change the position of sitting, because usually I feel that when people are trying to put themselves like forward, it's because they still not feel listened to. And when they get a little bit more, not relaxed, but they have another position, it's very difficult to explain, isn't it? But it's like very small signs like that I would look for. I would also look for if they take their time to actually, if they're having an inner experience. So if I can perceive that they're having an inner experience and a lot of silence combined with sounds, usually that combination between silence and sounds, like and then a silence, and then so that kind of small sounds, I find that wherever I am in the world, we always have that combination of silence with sounds when people are actually progressing. So that is one thing. And if it's a more collective setting, if it's in organizations or bigger groups, for me, it's very important not to define if I can see what works, but I will be able to create with other people what they want to see that works. How would they notice that it works? And we write it down. So we will have indicators that will change week by week or month by month. Instead of having a fixed set of indicators, I usually let people create their own indicators. So we have a fixed set of indicators only for the organizations or the CEO or whoever who wants it. And all the rest of it is popping up indicators. And I think that is very nice, because then you are able to really sense what's working.
And I'd like to explore that. So, you know, say you're dealing with, I don't know, a group of, say, 20,000 people, and you've come up with these indicators and things. What are the sensors into those networks that feed you back the information?
Sorry, what is the sensors within the organization if we have a lot of people with popping up indicators?
Well, you know, you've got so many people we're not interacting with them one-on-one. So with a large group like that, how does the information about what they're noticing flow back to you?
Yeah, usually that also changes a lot, because usually we define that from topic to topic, or we define that from group to group. And it always has to be like very public. It could be in the corridors, it could be on the windows, it could be wherever, where you could have these pop-up indicators all the time when you go right. So the last time what we did was to ask for a whole space, a public space, a whole corridor. So the whole corridor and the entrance, people passed by and they noticed. They put down in words, oh, I noticed this and this and that is working. I noticed this and this and that. So every time you got in and out of the organization, it was huge. It was like, wow, so many things are working. That was a very nice thing. That was not my idea. It was people. They did it.
It worked for it. It's interesting. In Agile, we talk about information radiators. So putting information up on wall to radiate out, to have that information. And it was also an information gatherer, because you're saying people would write on those walls?
That they pass by every day and they write down what they noticed.
And they're writing. So they're writing on those walls is how you were gathering that information.
They write on their own walls, and they do it in a common space where they can all do it, and it's not something that have to do. They just, if they spontaneously feel they want to note out something that worked, put it down. They note it down.
So it's a generative process. Is that what they would call that? Where one thing leads to another, to another, to another?
Yeah, perhaps, yeah.
It's interesting. There's a group, or there's a group called Kinevin, which deals with complexity, and they've got a tool called SenseMaker. And the idea of SenseMaker is that you can send it to people and record their anecdotal evidence. So it's actually about recording verbatims than it is about, it could be written or it could be verbal, but it's about recording the verbatim. And the stories, those little stories, are way more useful and powerful than necessarily a hardcore KPI. I don't know quite enough about the tool yet. I am very impressed by it. They've done some work with the Australian military, or believe it or not. And, you know, you can be sitting in a room with the generals, and they would pull up an anecdote from a soldier saying it was hard to get toilet paper when we were in Darwin. And that's a really concrete example of a process that wasn't working, but the general had never heard anything about that because it got lost in the layers of command going up. But a simple anecdote of, you know, this is a problem, the general will go, well, I can fix that, you know, writes an order, it's done. But he just didn't know about it because the sensors deep down into the organisation weren't there to draw that information up.
But how do they send them to one specific person, or do they?
No, lots of people, more diverse. The idea is to try and get it from, everyone in the organisation.
Okay, but they send it to a place where it's accessible for the public, for the rest of them, so they can all see the messages?
No, not necessarily. The results might be published, but they'll be anonymised. But you can actually pull out those stories as well. It depends a bit on how you design it.
I can send you a message about this anecdote and about...
Oh, no, it's structured more like sort of a survey, a research tool where, you know, people are sent a link, they fill in the information, you've got specific questions in there around that,
What did you call it?
It's called SenseMaker.
SenseMaker.
Yeah. The only reason I haven't played with it more is because it's a little expensive, but it's interesting to check into. I just find it, for me, it's a way of, rather than, you know, in organisations you might have a cultural survey once a year or something. The idea is that this is much more frequent, much more real time, and much more, much more real time. It can give you more insights into the behaviours about what's going on.
That's very nice. Yeah, I think this is really a topic that has a lot to it. I mean, you can explore this for a whole year. It's a topic for a book, right?
Well, I was hoping to at least write an article out of it. So, yeah.
Okay, you can start with an article and then
then go from there. Yeah. Sorry, just keeping an eye on things. Oh, we got 5 more minutes.
Okay, so.
And Gil, what do you experience?
I'm trying to follow y'all. I don't know what y'all are talking about.
Sorry.
But that's okay.
Is it the accent or is it the terms we're using?
It's kind of the terms we're using. A little bit. I mean, y'all know, you two know each other, right? Or you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's also corporate jargon. If you don't operate in the corporate world, it's
that's what it is. Because I'm a therapist, and I it's a little bit different world, but
that's
it
the wonderful
interesting.
thing about this. It's wonderful that we can have that kind of exchanging experiences.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and I've always been interested in organizations and how they work and how they don't work and what can make them better. I work with families, so you know, I'm always working with them to help them get.
And how do you notice then? How was it noticed?
For me, it's kind of an internal. Well, it's partly internal. It's like when I feel like it's not exactly becoming one, but it's like I don't know how to explain it. It's like when the conversation starts to flow. I think that things have changed. You know, you can tell when there's a change. You can just sense a shift in the room, and it's something inside of me that I sense. And I guess they sense it, but I'm thinking that I'm more aware of it, but I don't know that I'm really more aware of it, but I'm more cognitively aware of it, if that makes sense. I mean, they probably sense it, but they probably don't care where it came from.
You're looking for it. I mean, interestingly, so some other work I've done with energy psychology, which is, you know, working with meridians and tapping and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's, you know, way out there, but very effective. But one of the things I ended up developing kind of an internal barometer that my breath would change when they had a shift in them. And so I would notice my breath change and then just say to them, so what shifted? And they'd go, oh, well, this. And occasionally someone would go, well, how did you know that something shifted there? And well, my body kind of lets me know. And I've worked with plenty of other energy workers that, you know, sometimes it's their neck, or it's their right hand or whatever. They develop some sort of internal indicator that something's going on.
And sometimes you can change your breath and they'll follow.
Exactly.
Yes, definitely done that.
Yeah.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing that you can actually, when you can see things are heating up and you can change your breath, and then everybody's like starting to
slows it down. Yeah, and then they have more time to think, and you have more time to think.
Yeah, pace and lead. And have you done that with groups, Sophie? I've only ever done that sort of one-on-one.
You do that with a whole group. You can do that even when you have 100 people in front of you. You can change your breath, and you will be able to see people move slightly and change, so they will have more space to breathe. So you can do that with a lot of people. And before, when I negotiated very difficult conflicts on the phone, you can also change it and hear it on the phone. Maybe sometimes it's the only clue you have when you are doing it on the phone, right? So when you can't see people, so you can only have that breath of how you are actually trying to communicate. Or many times you can also feel it in the gravity of the voice. So when you have a lot of tension, you will automatically talk a little bit more up here. So when people start getting relaxed and they feel like, okay, they're getting to a solution, I feel that always the gravities go down like 1 or 2 turns, and then suddenly they just relax a little bit more. So when they relax more, the gravity of the voice will always go down.
So subtle. But we do pick up on things. It's amazing.
That's interesting. It's amazing. Yeah.
I think we have to write a book, all of us together. So we can keep interchanging.
Yeah.
I'll just post this message and I wanted to share a quick story.
So? The time's up.
Just 1 minute to go, but you reminded me of the breathing. There was something I was going to share there. No, it's gone, whatever it was. It'll come back. Yeah, but I just love this idea of so many senses that we have and pick up from people.
Very interesting.
Changed with the pandemic. We have to develop new capacities and abilities to be able to catch it on the internet. It's not the same.
No, and I finally remember what it was. When I used to do telephone sessions with clients, and, you know, talking about needing to notice the breathing, I bought myself the highest quality set of headphones I could get, microphone, and auditory wasn't necessarily my primary modality, if you like. And this really trained me. I would often do sessions with my eyes closed just so I could be completely tuned into the slightest change in intonation on their voice and their breathing, whatever. But yeah, I deliberately got really high quality headphones so I could pick up everything on the other end.
It's a great idea.
It's funny that usually most solution-focused practitioners, of the classical ones, say that the non-verbal, we should not pay that much attention to it. And actually, when we start talking about it, all of us, we're putting so much attention to it. We just don't want to verbalize it. I don't know what it is.
Yeah. All right, we'll drop everyone back into the main room. Nice to meet you, Gail.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you, both of you. Thank you.
Must be getting late over there, Sophie. Oh, it's muted you again when you drop back into the main room. I tell you, once you get people talking, they don't want to come back. People dropping back in. Ah, 5 seconds to go. We'll get everyone back. There we go. Excellent. I think we've almost got everyone back. A few more people popping back in. It's always the thing with the breakout rooms. You let people start a discussion and then they don't want to come back. And that was it was a tough question. And like I said, I'm curious where it connected to you, how it connected, what connections it made in your brain and your experience. Who would like to share? Yeah, Lucy, if you want to unmute.
Okay, micro on. First, we had difficulty with audio and image, but so we named everything: body, voice, somatic feelings. And at the end, the main clue for me was we are all the same from different places over the world. But one thing in common, curiosity, was the name. This is, we are curious people, and we were probably curious children, and we'll still are curious, and we don't want to change that. I'm speaking only for myself for that last thing, but we do have ways to notice, but curiosity is like the flame, like starting a candle. So
yes, if you're not curious, you don't necessarily pay attention, do you? Yeah. That's a good trick. What else? What else did people come up with or explore?
Hello.
Hey, Gary.
Hi. I started thinking about it in terms of co-creation, and my limited understanding of microanalysis telling me that within, someone's already responding to me in some way within 200-300 milliseconds of me talking. So we're somehow noticing together. And we had this we had Lee Wei join us, and he's part of a sports team. And he made me put something together that I had never thought about before in terms of knowing, because he was talking about the fact that if someone in the team hasn't got any energy, how it affects everybody. And we know this. And we sort of always think, well, why does one person have such an effect on a team? But if you now, I hadn't, other people may have done this, but I had never thought about a team before as a co-creation. And if it's so interdependent and so co-created, then if one person just slightly pulls out, it actually breaks the fabric in a much more powerful way than I had ever noticed and thought about, than if we think of team as a bunch of individuals. So for me, there was a great learning in the comments that Li Wei, who's joined us from Shanghai, was saying.
I admit I love my Aussie rules football, and it's amazing. You can watch a team, exactly like Kerry's saying, you can watch a team that's in flow, that's communicating across the field. They're moving like a flock of birds almost. And then there might be one person that's just lagging a bit, or just not quite, they got the energy in the middle, and you start to see it disrupt. Then you also see it the other way, like Dusty Martin with the Richmond Tigers, it can lift the whole team just by his impact on it. And there was I've forgotten the book, but I'll find it and post it if I can. It was about how a good captain is more important to a champion team than necessarily the champions, and yet most of the champion teams, we don't know who the captain was. Like Michael Jordan, Chicago Bulls, everybody knows that. They don't know who the captain was during that whole winning streak. And this guy who particularly wrote this book, it's going to annoy me that I can't remember it, researched all these winning teams and found that there was an almost unknown captain in that team. But his communication style, his honesty, the way he coached others, that was common to all these captains. And yet they weren't a media star, but they had an incredible impact on that team. What else what else came up in those discussions? We were talking, in the session I was in with Gail and Sophie. We talked about how sometimes we can pick up on other things with reactions in our body, and also how to pick it up through an organisation. Whereas, Sophie gave a great example of having something set up at the entranceway to a building where people could come in and write things, and that's a way of that information, or I kind of think of it like an organisational nervous system. You're trying to get information back from a larger group of people, and we can't do it one-on-one using our, necessarily our individual senses, but we've got to find ways to get that information to flow back to us and notice it. We also talked about sometimes, what do they call it? A witness perspective. You're having a conversation with somebody and some part of you seems to be able to step aside and go, there's something different there. And then we sort of drop back into ourselves. So that witness position can be very useful and surprising sometimes.
Well, I think another thing that, can notice, we're focusing a little bit on the group that you're working, and what would you notice about them? I guess the other question is, what would others notice? So, when you talk about, you were just talking about the example of Aussie rules. If one team, if you're working with one team, and how would you know that they're being successful would be, or what you're proposing is being successful, was what are the other teams saying about this team?
Wow.
What are other people's supporters saying about this team? What are other competitors and saying about this team? And in a business context, of course, you'll notice that maybe you're picking up more clients, or your worthy rivals or competitors, whichever way you want to look at them, are starting to take more notice of you. You notice that you suddenly start to feature on a television program as an exemplar of some particular industry. So the noticing is 360. It's everything, not just about what's happening within your own environment. I call that looking up. because it's something we very rarely do is look up. You know, we miss that. We notice in two dimensions. We don't notice the fourth dimension either, which is the feeling dimension. You know,
oh dear.
It's.
I'm sorry, John, I just missed that last bit of my internet froze, but and I'm also very conscious of time. So thank you very much for the session. I did mention I really want to try and write something up around this. I think I proposed it to Kerry a few months ago about writing a topic. So I'm not sure how I distill this out of this because it'd be so complex, but maybe in writing it, I can process my thinking. But thank you very much for all participating in the session. Hope to see you in another one.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Very much.
Bye.
Bye.